feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Monday morning. It's March 17th after the Wolves' 128-102 win over the Utah Jazz on Sunday night. We will get to at least a few topics from that game in this one. Ant had a huge scoring night, finished with 41 points without even playing in the fourth quarter because the game was out of hand. Jaylen Clark, again, just like a menace defensively. And I just want to, I don't know if he's going to be in the rotation forever the rest of the season. So I do want to make sure that we talk about him now. And then Dante DiVincenzo is playing point guard. So that's all coming up about, I guess, kind of in a game recap of the Jazz game. But what I want to do first here in this episode is something that Jace and I have at least done around this time the last couple of years. It's just kind of begin talking about best, worst playoff matchups. I think for me, it helps me kind of like define strengths and weaknesses of the Wolves so as to kind of look at those things throughout these last, again, 10, 15 games or whatever. And I want to kind of try to maybe collaboratively put together a best to worst playoff matchup ranking between the Thunder and Lakers. Yeah, you know, I don't know. I'm just saying we were texting about this a little bit last night. I don't feel like super strongly about my list because I think it's really weird and it's really close of you know, you could look at these different ways, and I wouldn't disagree with you. So again, what we're going to do is kind of rank best to worst the Wolves playoff matchups between the Thunder, Lakers, Nuggets, Grizzlies, Rockets, and Warriors, as I think those could all in some way even be a first round matchup or for sure a second round matchup. But yeah, I got Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick here with me. What's up, man?
Sorry, I always forget that I interject before you introduce me, and I'm like,
"That's my bad."
Yeah. I'm doing great.
How did you approach this?
It was tough because I had like my initial thoughts when you sent the list of like, well, that team's the worst team of those six or whatever, and move down the list that way, and then you just like actually think about it and you dig into like matchup stuff and numbers and whatnot, and you're like, I don't know, like I really do think. I honestly look at this list and think most of these series would be very competitive. And so then it just feels like splitting hairs on all of them. So my number one was actually easy of like the one I think they should most prefer. And then the rest I really was like, I could redo this and reorder them many times.
So let's do it that way. Let's start with most preferable, easiest, quote unquote, which I'm with you. I don't think any of these are like, that the Wolves get in a first round playoff matchup and you go, oh, they got this one and move on to the second round. I don't feel matchup or quality of team like that. But was your team Houston?
No.
See, like, no, Houston.
Yeah.
Who'd you do?
Mine was Denver. I know like it's and I know that almost feels like the easy answer because they've blown them out twice now.
I thought you would zag on that because you would be like, that's what everyone else is gonna say right now.
No, I can't. I can't do it. And it literally and this is gonna be kind of my argument for every other team is I think it comes down to like you have to be a good defensive team to beat Minnesota. I really do feel that way. And Denver's not. Look at this winning streak right here, right? 8 games. What are the 2 games that have been competitive of these 8?
Orlando and Miami.
Orlando is the 4th ranked defense in the NBA. Miami's 12th. They have just smashed.
Clark, Julius, and an Ant. Yeah, they got
can muck it up. You know, like. They have absolutely beat up the 20th, 22nd, 25th, 26th, 27th, and 29th ranked defenses in the NBA. And Denver just falls into that bucket. And I just think like Minnesota, as good as they've played offensively, I do think like good defensive teams can cause them to stall. I really would be surprised if we see like, wow, this great offense continues against the best of the best teams defensively. And I just don't think – I think Minnesota can just play the way they want to play and get into their best basketball against Denver. And I think we've seen it with Houston and these other teams. You could say like, well, the Wolves just weren't playing as well in some of these other games. But like you can dig through the numbers as we go through each team. I put some of them up, but it's like – they can make Minnesota play like stall ball basketball. And that is when Minnesota is at its worst. And I don't think Denver can do that. So I really don't feel like Denver has like a great path to winning 7 games against, 4 out of 7 against Minnesota.
Yeah. I no argument. My Denver hesitation, and I was just like thinking about this last week after the game, is like, what if they just go to Jokic, 25 times in the post, you
Mhm.
know,
That's
and
fair.
you know that's the path to me for Denver to winning that, and the Wolves refusing to bring the double and just trying to guard Jokic with Rudy as they did and had success with that. And we all wrote about how if you get rid of Murray and Porter Jr. and Jokic is the only one who scores, yeah, I get it, and that worked, and I think that's the right path. I just have this distinct memory of once the Wolves got PJ Dozier this summer. This is stupid. I went.
It was the tipping point for you, obviously. Yeah.
This is no. Listen to this. So I was like, all right, PJ Dozier. I start looking at PJ Dozier's. When did he last play? Like in the NBA, and it's like one of them was last time he was really playing was in the bubble, and there was this game, and he's on Denver, and they're playing Utah. And I'm like, I'm gonna watch this game. Like Joe Ingles the Wolves had just signed Joe Ingles too, and it's like Conley, Gobert, and Ingles versus.
You are a sicko. Yeah,
I know. No, it was a summer. It was a summer. All right.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But
what else is anybody else doing in the summer? I would think
this first quarter, Jokic scores 22 points, and it was the same strategy by Utah of like everybody else stay home, Rudy on Jokic, and it's not even really shade at Rudy. Like, I think Jokic could have been anybody really back there. It could have been Wemby. It could have been, Jaren Jackson Jr., whatever. I just think Jokic does have a gear where, and maybe in the playoffs, I know on last Tuesday he wanted to pass, but I think he can give you that 40, 45 if you just play through him as a scorer the whole time. Does fatigue factor in there? Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I couldn't get Denver to be my number one. I couldn't do it with Jokic on that team and having still some concerns about, Rudy guarding him. But other than that, I don't.
Yeah, and I think even the more recent example of your argument is Game 5 last year, where
Yeah.
I mean that was a legitimate masterclass of like, wow, this is the best player in the world. He knows he has to score here. It was almost like he was like, we really have to win this game, and trying to get him over the finish line with his offense. And he did that. I do think over the course of 7 games with how much they make him work to guard Ant in the pick and roll.
Yep.
And it's how they have no choice but to blitz it because they don't have like a rim protector or anything. So he has to move a lot. And I just think, you could see by 6 and then definitely 7, it was like he was gassed and he still like played well, but he has to be so great for them to win that series. And I just don't know if it's sustainable over the course of a series. And I don't think over a course of a series he wants to do 4 or 5 games of him carrying the load offensively.
Well, and the defensive point with Ant is a good one. We've talked about this too. They're not going to leave. They don't want to leave Jokic back just sitting at the rim in drop right against Ant because that's not a rim protector for Ant. So they're going to try and. The best thing for Denver to do against Ant is have Jokic be up. Jokic is good at that. Get a poke. Don't let him split it. Yeah, whatever. But that is a significantly more taxing defensive style for your 5 than it is to sit back and drop there. So yeah, is it reasonable to think that Jokic could have 40 efficiently on offense every game and do that defensively? Yeah, I don't know. Probably not. But I struggle to question him. And I still want to see, I hope Aaron Gordon plays in the April 1st game.
Yeah.
Let's get a look at what that looks like. But I can't argue with that your Denver one there. I just went with Houston, just kind of lower overall talent level. But to make a counter argument against it, it is the defensive stuff. Why I have Oklahoma City as the worst option, a big part of it is Dort or Caruso or somebody on Ant at all 48 minutes of a really tough defender there and somebody to guard Randall. If you have that perimeter contain on them, and I think Houston could decently do that against this group or against the Wolves, but they were my best playoff matchup as of March 17th of the 6 teams.
Who do you have 2? No. Just Houston. Okay. So I put Houston as my 3rd.
Okay.
And I frankly, like, I keep looking back to this and like when Minnesota, the one like convincing win, obviously they had that incredible rally against Houston in Houston where they were outplayed for
Yeah.
40 plus minutes of the game. Houston second half of a back-to-back did just seem to run out of gas. And credit to Minnesota that they've done this. They're relentless. They don't give up. But they did steal that game. They've actually outplayed Houston once. And in the one time they did outplay Houston at Target Center, Jabari Smith didn't play. And in that stretch in January, Houston stunk. And Van Vliet was out, but I really think Jabari Smith was the biggest part of it. I mean, you just look at him this year. He's got a defensive rating of 105.
105?
Yeah, for the year. Yep. And his net rating against the Wolves in three games this year, his net rating is plus 20. His defensive rating is 103. So I just think the problems that Şengün can give them offensively, when it's just Şengün out there, they can really answer back on the other end. But I do think that Smith-Şengün pairing is a pretty good one for Houston, especially against Minnesota. I just like the things that Houston can do defensively. I think Minnesota would probably win that series, but I think it would be a lot of tight, close games where it'd be got to make this tough shot, because I think that those would end up looking like a lot of rock fights where you're looking at 105, 100 kind of games, because I do like the way that Houston generally can match up defensively, just with kind of what they have in terms of their length and their options.
So you're saying, as of right, I mean, put you on the spot, right? If it was Houston, Minnesota right now, and Houston was home court, you think you'd take the Wolves in that series?
I would take the Wolves, but it would be in at least 6. Yeah. But yeah, yes, I think, I mean, maybe get a blowout along the way, but I think it would just be highly competitive across the board, because I do think Minnesota, it's so tough because we want to say, hey, Minnesota's figured out their offense. And the reality is they've looked great against terrible defenses, and the couple of defenses they played, the Orlando game was not bad. But certainly we saw that third quarter was okay, we've seen this before. And the Miami game was tough, so we haven't really seen them play too much against good defenses here for me to definitively say, yep, the ball movement, all that stuff, they figured it out on that end of the court, because I have to see a team that can provide a little bit more resistance. And we're not going to get that until at least Detroit.
And those games too were games where they just felt comfortable guarding Randall with one, and then that kind of creates,
and they can do that,
Yeah. I do. And that again, and that's why these are all close, but I'm drawing the line here for you then of, you think if it was a Wolves Nuggets series, you would take the Wolves at the moment. You would take Houston, and Houston's your third. So who's the other team you think they would?
I don't feel great about this one, but I just couldn't. And it's hard because there's no evidence. I put Golden State. And I know you love Golden State, and I don't disagree with that in general. But I've just, even I know Golden State went 3-1. I know that was pre-Jimmy, and Golden State just wasn't very good. But those were the games where I just didn't feel like Minnesota played well. And you can always attribute some of that to opponent, but Minnesota scored in those games. They just didn't get stops. And I know with Jimmy, their defense probably gets significantly better, and just in terms of team defense and everything else, on top of Jimmy being a decent on-ball defender. But I can't get over the idea of it's just not, in terms of there's no rim protection there. There are weak points you can kind of hit within Golden State's defense.
That's where I got caught up a little bit too. Ant and Julius are guys getting downhill to the rim can punish their lack of rim protection, or would need to be able to beat Golden State. I do think when I'm watching Golden State right now, though, that is pretty clearly the weak point, right? Playing Guy Santos or Quentin Post right at the 5, and I don't know what that would look like in a playoff series, but that's going to be the weak point. And then it just becomes all right, can Rudy dominate?
Right. I think he's big in a couple of these series as I go down the list. Frankly.
But particularly the Golden State one, right? Obviously,
I have him as
one is probably.
I have him particularly at Golden State and the Lakers, frankly.
Yep. Yep. Just because he needs to they don't win that series unless he dominates that center matchup there. I got Golden State all the way to my 5th.
Okay, yeah. And I don't think that's wrong either. Literally as 2 through 5 for me. And even 6, I was a little bit am I just giving the Thunder too much credit, because they are the Thunder? But 2 through 5, I honestly sat there multiple times and just kept switching it around.
I kind of did too. And then I was I was just kind of prisoner of the moment with Golden State, which you picking Denver as number 1 too is kind of prisoner of the moment too. So it's just, it's hard, and it's crazy. It's this close. I know when we've done this in the past, it's been
pretty obvious.
We easily had our at least first 2 of what we can't even agree even close here.
No,
really on what our.
And I'm not what are you thinking? I'm yeah, I get it. I mean, it's so tough. It is so tough where I can watch a game and be like, okay, but I can see how this could play out differently. But when you don't even have a game of evidence with Golden State with Jimmy, and we won't have one,
I know
that is where it gets a little bit like, oh, okay, don't know.
Well, the Jimmy part's so interesting too. Of how do they deploy Jimmy in that? Do you
Right.
put
Is he
him
guard
on
and? Because I don't know if you want to do that for 40 minutes.
I think maybe
But you
they
can do
start
that in the
Gary
sense
Payton.
that, yeah, sure. You can, though, in that Jimmy is more of a hub for them offensively than a producer. And maybe that would have to be different in the playoffs. And to Jimmy's, I think this is a big thing. It's why like Luka is a big deal in playoff matchups. You need guys who are composed and skilled enough to kind of take on what will even be a ratcheted up Wolves defensive pressure. And Jimmy is just one of those guys who can play poised and do what he wants to do regardless. So there is that element of like, even when things are going badly for them, they could go to Jimmy and he would probably get something.
And probably get whoever the Wolves decide to put him on in foul trouble. I mean, that's that's a staple of playoff Jimmy, right? And I don't know if it would be if they're putting Jaden on Steph or Jaden on Jimmy or however that works. But that's what Jimmy does, is he's going to get down to the middle of the floor and he's going to pump fake and he's going to have that wide stance and he's going to get you. You know, he's going to draw fouls in that sort of way. But I think Jimmy in that matchup is, what is he defensively like? How do they? Would be really curious to see how they deployed him defensively, because
wouldn't even stun me if he was on Randall. You know?
Yeah, right. No, because if they went Draymond at the 5, and then you just have Draymond on Jokic or whatever like that. Again, or you already said that, lack of rim protection. But let's talk about the Lakers a little bit. I'll just read through mine. I think Lakers
okay, you do that and then I'll do it, because otherwise people are going to be like, I don't know who they have.
So I have my easiest to hardest is easiest Houston. I went Memphis second easiest. Then I went Denver third, all really close there. Then I went Lakers. Then I went Golden State Warriors. Then I went Thunder.
I went Nuggets, number easiest. Then Golden State, Houston, Memphis, Lakers, Oklahoma City.
Okay, give me Lakers thoughts.
Okay, I still stand by the kind of basically the no rim protection thing. But it is kind of like Golden State, but the Lakers do have a lot of length, and I do think the Lakers' best defensive lineup is pretty solid. Yep. And I do think just between Reeves hasn't necessarily played well against Minnesota in the past, because I think if you put like a Jaden McDaniels on Reeves, I think that gives Reeves some problems. Yeah. But as like a third fiddle option, it's just another guy who, and I think about this all the time with LeBron, with Luka, with Reeves, like the Wolves' superpower when things get tough is just that defensive pressure. It's you not only like not even getting shots, but turnovers, leading to easy breakout buckets the other way. And now all of a sudden it's turned into like a 10-0 run in the blink of an eye. And I just think they have enough guys who are comfortable and confident handling the ball and kind of playing at their own pace that can negate that to some degree. So for me, it's all going to come down to, like, I think the Lakers are going to get to, 110 points. It's, can the Wolves get there too?
Yeah.
And then it just comes down to how much do you believe in everything they've done defensively but way before Luka got there, but then sustained even with Luka there. And can they do that against Minnesota? And even that one Lakers game, that's one where I go, well, it is kind of hard in that not only did Ant get ejected, because I don't really think that was going to swing it, but Rudy not playing in that game is a big deal to me. I mean, they got beat on the boards. They have like 16 offensive rebounds in that game. And I think Rudy in that matchup specifically, picturing Jackson Hayes trying to box out Rudy or the Lakers trying to play smaller with their probably best defensive 5. That's where I think Rudy would be a huge swing one way or the other. But just the Luka LeBron thing, I really do think they would be able to score enough to beat Minnesota if they could get stops on the other end.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think a big thing in any of these is thinking about the Wolves and the turnover battle, right? That's, if you look at like the 4 factors or anything like that, and if there's one that's a kind of red flag for the Wolves, it's turnovers, right? And that how that swings games, and that's why going through it, it became pretty clear to me that Oklahoma City is far and away the worst of these. And the rationale, again, behind that is a guy to guard Julius, a guy to guard Ant, and just in general, a defensive shell that's going to contain the perimeter with pressure. And that is going to trigger turnovers. And I think the Lakers with this group can do that too. And then it becomes about the Wolves. Can you manipulate things? Can you effectively manipulate this so Luka's in the action or Reeves is in the action? And that's what I don't think of the Wolves as particularly great at picking in that, So I do think the Lakers ball pressure of when I've watched them and, Vando, Finney-Smith, LeBron, there's just a real commitment to that in particular, the shell of it and ball contain. And that's why,
Rui is a decent matchup for Randall. Like they do just have guys who can, they match up pretty well. And like the rim protection thing isn't necessarily there. I think Ant would probably have to have a decently big series and Rudy would, but like you said, they'd have to match up, manipulate, and it's kind of Minnesota to do that if it takes more than like one step. if it requires just more than like one on-ball screen at the top of the court, if the Lakers can pre-switch something or whatever, so then they can switch. That's where and I think they would do things like that. Redick has proven to be a very good schematic coach in the regular season, which makes me believe he's just going to crank it up come playoffs.
Right.
Can the Wolves on the court, on the fly, be like, now what do we do next? And that would be a big challenge for them, I think.
Yeah, you go into that and you go, I feel like it's likely that JJ Redick is going to come into that series poking at the things that give the Wolves problems. It's just that here we go. This is a good scout here against this team. Let me grab our break. We can keep talking about this a little bit and then move on as well. Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino, and go down there for March Madness. Parlay Lounge. They have like a full kind of you would think of like a sports book setup in Vegas. Great place to watch the games. We've been down there to do some of these Wolves watch parties, live shows, and that I really do think it'd be a fun place to get down there for March Madness if you're looking for a place to go. If you do go down there, be sure to get an Island Passport club card. It's like the players card they have, but for the month of March they have like a ton of giveaways just by creating an account and swiping that card when you're playing at the tables or anything. You're entered into all these promotions. I just think it'd be a fun way to spend March Madness, and then also keep April 5th on your schedule as a watch party for that Wolves Sixers game. Kyle and I will be doing a live show at 5 p.m. before that game starts at 6. Today's show is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Realty. Adriana Lonick is a Minnesota and Wisconsin licensed realtor, and if you're in the market for buying or selling a home, contact Adriana. You can do that by calling or texting her at 715-304-9920. You can go to her website, thedancingrealtor.com. And the perk we have is when you do sign up for a free consultation, you're entered to win some Wolves tickets. I know a handful of listeners have bought homes through Adriana and have won some tickets as well. So if you are in the market for buying or selling a home, Wolves fan, Adriana's a Wolves fan, contact her at thedancingrealtor.com or call or text at 715-304-9920 to book that strategy session and win some Wolves tickets. We didn't talk about Memphis. Let's just hit that really quick.
I want you to start. Yeah, I want you to start with that.
This is prisoner in the moment too of like wondering where they're going to be at once they hit the playoffs. I turn on Grizzlies games right now and it's the fourth quarter and I see like Marvin Bagley out there, and they're just it's not a fully formed team at all, and they're kind of in the opposite spot of the Wolves where things are coming back, which I think it's really big that the Wolves are peaking at the right time, and what I'd say that about any team, and maybe I should be giving Houston a little bit more credit for that.
Phoenix last year peaked late.
Touche. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be a hard series and it would be physical. I do think it is one of those. I step back and look at it and I go, a lot more talent on the Minnesota side. I just think they have a lot more talent in this, and it's going to be about, all right, can you just solve some of the things that they're going to try and do? Are they going to do that Jalen Wells thing where they just face guard Ant the whole time? That worked. If that works in a 7-game series, that's embarrassing for the Wolves. Like, that's not a real NBA guarding guys tactic. They should be able to handle that. I do think Jackson Jr. though at the rim, Edie at the rim. Well, they're going to be big. They're going to be physical. I have them as the second easiest one here, but I don't view it as very easy though either. I do still think I'd be on the Wolves there, and I just decided to put Jokic above them. That's really all that came down to.
Yeah, I mean that's the argument for Denver over anybody being like they have Nikola Jokic. It's like,
Yeah,
of course,
yeah,
like I mean that you could have been like that's the hardest matchup,
right.
because Nikola Jokic, and I'd be like, yeah, maybe, honestly
Yeah.
for Memphis, I truly think that Minnesota gets up for Memphis games, even when they weren't playing well, and Memphis has edged them twice. I think that matters. But Memphis, I was just digging into their numbers. Their most used 5-man, and I agree with this. Like the whole thing with Memphis is we've barely seen him healthy all season. Ja doesn't play that much. He has lately, and he's actually played pretty well. But obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr. out right now. Like they just don't have their guys a lot, and they haven't been able to pair them together a lot. But their most used 5-man, it's just 183 minutes. Bane, JJJ, Morant, Edey, Wells. Net rating of plus 25. D rating of 101. You just take Edey out of that, the 4-man of Wells, Jaren Jackson, Bane, Morant, 319 minutes, net rating of 17.5. Jaren Jackson's net rating through 2 games against Minnesota, 21.4. Net rating, D rating, net of 21.4, D rating of 100.7. I think like the biggest knock on Memphis is that generally speaking, Minnesota has had answers for Ja Morant. He's shooting 29% through 2 games against Minnesota this year, 39%, and even in that playoff series in 22. I just think,
and the Wolves just got a bunch of perimeter defenders.
They have a bunch of guys, and I think like the coaching staff and whatnot understands. Okay, here's how you defend a guy like Ja Morant. They certainly make him have to beat him with jump shots, and that is a good way to go against Ja. But I just think like Jaren Jackson Jr. is a problem for Minnesota. He's a matchup problem for them, and this is a team that like their big 3 are very formidable, just even in terms of matched up against Minnesota's top guys, and like those guys have experience. Those guys probably feel like they're at a point in their career where they're ready to make a run. But just in general, like Minnesota hasn't been able to beat them this year, and I know Minnesota wasn't playing as well, but like I definitely felt like Minnesota gave a couple of their better punches in those games and fell short. I like you said, the Edey Jackson thing, like they can protect the rim. I remember the game at Target Center. I was like, Ant's not going at the rim when Edey's out there, and that. I do think that would be a very competitive series, and I think it would be another one where a lot of games came down to the end. I think Minnesota's best card is that we think we can actually slow down your best player pretty consistently, and that matters. But sometimes Jaren Jackson Jr. looks like their best player. So
sure, yeah, no, that is true, and it's also I think turnovers is the biggest thing, fear for the Wolves, but giving up offensive rebounds. I mean, they've been way better about that recently. Could I see a world where, the Wolves play the Grizzlies in the first round and the Wolves lose in 6 and we're talking about afterwards they couldn't keep them off the offensive glass? Like, yeah, I could. I think if the Wolves lose that series, that's what we're talking about there. That's certainly lower on the concern level than it has been for the Wolves in previous years. Like all the guards rebound for the Wolves now. Rudy should be able to hold his own. I think Loki, he's been really awesome since returning, just cleaning the glass, deterring at the rim. He would be big in that series too.
I definitely agree with the turnovers thing, especially, and we've seen this in those games when Ja is not out there. They just don't really have like a secondary ball handler, like to even come close to being their primary. When Ja's not on the court, we've seen like Bane bring the ball up the court, and Jaden McDaniels just has him in hell. I mean, it's like I can't get the ball past half court. So
that's gonna be full court all game.
Yeah, and that puts a lot on, and they just their release is just to have Jaren Jackson bring the ball up. But then you have to get into sets and whatnot. It would be a lot on Ja's shoulders of taking on a lot of that load while probably also getting targeted defensively. So they can make things very difficult on him. But yeah, like I
would be the Jackson
Memphis,
Jr. thing. You're right.
Yeah, how effective is he? How much is he in foul trouble? Like those would be big questions. Like if there was games where Jaren Jackson Jr. wasn't in foul trouble and played 38 minutes, like I would say Memphis probably wins those games, to be honest.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Let's circle back to this in 2 weeks or so, because they play Memphis at the beginning of April. I'll be interested to see that one. I have that Denver game at the beginning of April as well. But it's gotta be funny. Like Golden State, we're gonna have no data points.
Yeah,
if that's whenever that series happens there, and the Lakers is limited data points as well. Just
super limited.
I mean, that's just the
But
trade deadline.
here's probably where I think some people would probably say, why would you guys really have? And you laid out some of the points, but Oklahoma City, I think probably some Wolves fans are not scared of this team at all, or thinking that it's the worst one because, well, they split. They didn't even have their guys for a couple of those. Like, how could you think Oklahoma City is the hardest one? So, why did you end up there? Even given seeing how well Minnesota played them in general.
Everyone, I start with what do I think they have to slow Ant and Julius simultaneously? That is a big step in that team's favor. If I think they have a guy to contain them decently with single coverage plus rim protection, and I think that's why it's important. These last 12 games, 15 games, whatever, are really important for Oklahoma City to make that Hartenstein Holmgren thing work, because if Holmgren can be that elite rim protector there while they also have the ability to contain Ant and Julius decently well in isolation, that's just going to be tough for the Wolves to be able to, to score with them. I think, and I think the Wolves have a good defense to be able to limit them some too. But I don't know if we're just making the list of weaknesses of the Wolves or potential areas to be exploited. I think we would write OKC next to the most of those areas more than any team. And they've just also, like, I am a believer that the regular season is indicative in the NBA. And they've clearly been the best team of all these teams all season. There's no way that I'm going to be able to go into a series Wolves Thunder where I'm going to be able to pick them. And I can make a case of picking the Wolves against any of the other 5 teams. I really think so.
Yeah, I think Hartenstein has like a +12 net rating in his minutes against the Wolves. I think he's pretty vital. And so even the one when the Wolves won, where the Wolves were down a couple of guys, Hartenstein left that game in like the first half. I think that matters. Yeah, that matters a lot. He's pretty imperative, I think, to them, being like an actual finals team.
Yeah.
And I do think for Minnesota's thing, it is who is Oklahoma City's trusted second ball handler that they know can get the ball and be unbothered by Minnesota's defensive pressure. And that's where Oklahoma City's kind of weak point has been. Like, they often get killed, and the Jalen Williams is our primary guy here minutes. But Shea
against a team who guards like the Wolves guard, like they have the ability.
Yes. Yep. And it's only those teams. Like, there are plenty of times where it's like, oh man, like J-Dub's amazing. And he is a good player, but at the same time, I think Shea might play 44 minutes, in these games, and these minutes can get really shrunk down. So oftentimes you do look at best guys. I think if Shea and Hartenstein are both playing a lot of minutes, then it's going to be difficult for Minnesota to make too much hay. So I agree with you there. And I thought about trying to move it around, but I was like, I feel like I'm forcing it if I do.
48 minutes of Dort or Caruso on Ant is, and it's the same for Luka or Ja or whoever they get. It's 0 easy minutes for your primary offensive guy, and they've earned that. Let's talk about Ant a little bit from last night. He has 41 points in 3 quarters, and it's like I don't really know what to talk about the 41-point game, because Ant, and that's a credit to Ant. He just has this ability to score in bunches, particularly against teams like Utah, who do not have that perimeter contain against him. I thought in last night's game, the most encouraging part was the 17 points in the first quarter, and coming out, jumping on a bad team on a Sunday. Those are things that Ant wasn't doing consistently earlier in his career. And I do think Ant is very bought into this whole, like, every one of these games kind of down the stretch here is like a playoff game, and he's putting forth that effort to do the things that the Wolves need to do specific to that matchup. And I thought he did that last night. I know it's Utah, but I don't know if you don't get a great Ant game there last night, given what everybody else did. That one's close, right? That's a close game. So just some credit to Ant there for sure.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago when Ant was really struggling to try against these lower level teams, and one of Chris Finch's points of pleas to him was, can score a lot of points. You can have these big nights. Like he literally said that after Ant had a good game. He's like, I'm telling him you can have these kind of performances. And I think Ant has bought into that as well. I definitely think he's bought into the every game matters, but he's gone over 47 times this year. 4 of them are against terrible teams. Right. And you can take away Phoenix and be like, well, that doesn't feel like a terrible team, even though it is. But that's still 3. Utah, Washington, and one other one against an awful team as well. I don't remember who it was. But he's definitely bought into like, okay, this is easy. It often isn't easy for me anymore. I'm going to enjoy the nights where it's easy, you know, and that frankly, that's how you average 28, 29 points in the NBA is like when it's easy, you take advantage. And that's a shout out to him because before he couldn't even get himself to muster up trying, where now it's like, enjoy these nights, like bring it, have fun with it. Don't be like, this isn't worth my time, you know? And there are times earlier in his career where it's like, this game is not worth my time being out here. And that would be on either end of the court. He would literally just be standing there, be like, you guys go score, you know? And he's just not doing that anymore. And I think that no matter what it is that clicked in his mind to make him go out and be like, I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to go put the pedal down. It's been a huge advantage for Minnesota because it's always been like, well, bad team, guess Rudy has to have a good game, you know, like, or whatever. And now because Ant can do it so effortlessly against these teams that it just raises your floor against these cellar dweller teams. And yeah, like last night, you know, they're better for it. And Ant gets to not play the fourth quarter, you know, because he did that. So like there are benefits across the board. And I think he's starting to realize that.
Yeah, it was when we were talking to him after the game to your Finch point, like here's an opportunity to score a bunch. That's what Ant said. He's like, it was like the first quarter, and I was like, I think I'm going for 60, you know, and that's what he wants, you know, and whatever. If that's like,
no, that's no problem with that. No, don't say that in any negative way at all, you know?
Right. Yeah, but that was not 2 years ago Ant's view when they were playing the Wizards or a bad Blazers team or whatever.
It was, these guys suck. Why am I even out here? That was literally like, not to say he ever said that, but you could see it in the way he was playing.
Yeah. And even earlier this season, I do think he's turned a serious corner here. And I mean, Ant's having a great season, but just the night to night understanding of the importance of the game and how that relates to the Wolves seeding and the playoffs and all that stuff. Like, I could give him a gold star for that, but that was not a staple of like Ant's ethos as a player before. And it is, I mean, they absolutely needed that from him last night. The rest of the group, they needed Ant to go for 60 or to aim for going for 60. And he got decently close in 3 quarters. And I think that's a good signal of where this is moving. Let's talk about Jaylen Clark. Where am I at right here? Yeah. Jaylen Clark. I just think it's a super cool story. Like on a bunch of different levels. The craziest part to me is that he's even found a way to crack the rotation on the team in the league that has like the best perimeter defenders in the league, like maybe outside of Oklahoma City, you know, and that's all Jaylen was, you know, like before was, okay, well, if you ever needed to use him, it would be for an extra really good perimeter defender, but the Wolves have 7 of those ahead of him. That he's found a way to like climb up that ladder enough on a team that has been rigid about an 8-man rotation, that he's found a way to break through that is just a cool story for a kid, obviously, who tore his Achilles and made this level of comeback through a 2-way contract into an NBA contract. But the other sweet part of it is it's so helpful to the Wolves and has given them a different gear. I really don't think we're getting this Jaden McDaniels if Jaylen Clark never comes in and allows Jaylen Clark comes in and allows Jaden McDaniels to be something a little bit different, to not have to guard the ball the whole game, to be able to play off ball, to have a little bit more opportunity and effort available for the offensive side of the floor. I tweeted about this, I think, last week. Like we throw around the term like such and such player unlocked the team or unlocked a team's ability to do this. We do that too often. Jaylen Clark literally unlocked the Wolves' ability to play a little bit different. And that on its face is just a crazy thing, given how similar Jaylen Clark is to a lot of the other Wolves' best players. He was incredible last night and just one of those players you'd love to watch, picking guys up full court, being a menace. I loved it and just figured we should talk about that a little bit.
I would just say like those plays, the Alvarado like plays where it's like you're not paying attention, I'm going to get you, and you only do that. The attention to detail that it takes to every time check.
Yeah.
Like you checking every single time on the court. It's like one more thing. Like you're going to go play 24 seconds of defense, or at least 22, and he's taking the first 2 seconds and going, let's see if there's something here. It holds the other opponent to account all the time. And no team is 100% on, okay, let's be really intentional here about these passes and really focus. Is there anybody around me as they're coming up the court? And I think Finch said it last night, like those plays when he like gets those steals and then it's like a dunk the other way, like for Ant or whatever, like it's a backbreaker for the opponent. Like, and that's what gets target center rocking. That's what turns, a 4-0 run into a 6-8-0 run. Like, and all of a sudden it's like, Jesus, now we're down 16. Like this was a close game. Right. Those are like game breaking plays. Like there is such a thing as game breaking defense. And man, like he delivers it, and he does it again and again when he plays a lot of minutes. It's just those little plays that it's only worth 2 points, but it feels like it's worth 10. It is amazing, and I think what he's done is like the addition of him. Obviously, he's only playing like 5-6 minutes a game when they're fully healthy. Right now, in these couple times we've seen them against other teams, we'll see how much he plays tonight. But when he's out there, it's relieved, like it's allowed Jayden to do something different. It's also been like, in reality, it probably isn't a fair expectation to be like Anthony Edwards is going to be one of our best defenders while being our best offensive player, and he just hasn't been. And Jaylen makes that okay. It's another. He is that because Ant is usually their big physical, like I'll body up the opponent guard, and that is just what is required to bother some people. Jaylen can now be that when they need it, and Ant can't deliver, or maybe just is like, I'm not doing this.
Well, I mean that's just the reality of the situation. Is like you look at any number, Ant is not playing as good of defense as he was a season ago. The eye test says that as well, and I don't think that's.
And I think that has partially opened the door where you're like, well, there's no way he can get in the rotation. I do think Ant's defense probably opened the door a little bit more.
I think so too. And then I get to some, not to excuse it, and it's important that Ant, in the playoffs is plays locked in every single game defensively. And I think that's probably likely. But given what Ant's usage and role and just the kind of drag of his offensive workload has been, you just weren't going to, if Ant was an 80th percentile defender last season, he's just without Cat and more offensive usage. He's just not that. He's just not that level of defender. And so to your point, Jaylen Clark is probably most like Ant as a defender he has the foot speed and the strength, right? And that's different than McDaniels or Alexander Walker and how they kind of defend with length and more finesse. Yeah. In that way. I asked Finch about Jaylen Clark after the game, and he talked about the offense too, which is an important part of this.
I think first of all, he adds to our identity, defensive identity. So I think that's important, doubling it down on what we're already good at or what we have the ability to be really good at. That's one. Two is, I trust him implicitly, and his playing time is I trust him offensively as much as I trust him defensively. That's just as important right now. If we go out there, fit in. He makes a lot of really nice, smart, heady plays, little bounce passes in traffic, and usually, cuts and screens and moves around without the ball gets offensive rebounds, just all the little things that he can do without trying to take a big, chunk out of the offense. Other guys, like, they could certainly help us, but, we have a lot of offense right now, and we have times where we have other guys who need to see and feel the ball and shoot it. So anyone else in, let's say, Jaylen's position has to be super special offensively if they don't have the defensive, acumen. So that's how I see it, and that's why he works.
Love that answer. What do you make of the offensive part of that?
I agree. I mean, I think that's one thing that's kind of blown us away from when he really started playing a lot of minutes. It was like, wow, like, okay, yes, this guy is knocking down more shots than we would think he would, but also he's just playing smart out of the corners. I mean, it's not just standing there and shooting, and it is when that's required, but the ways he would cut and just move without the ball and seemingly always kind of prod at the right times of like, should I move here? And it was just like, this guy is seeing the game and understanding like what's required in terms of, spacing and movement. And that has not waned. Like if you can do that, you're always going to be able to do that. And, you know, you see guys in the NBA who can't shoot, and Jaylen has knocked down more shots than we thought he would. But even if he went through a shooting slump, sure, there'd be some nights where you'd be like, 0 for 4, can you really play Jaylen? But if you just watch possession to possession, it's like, well, he is forcing the defense, forcing the defense to adjust. You know, he's forcing them to move. He's kind of manipulating what they're doing. And there are guys who they can go 0 for 4 and be super harmful because they're just standing in the corner and they're just being ignored, and that's all there is to it. Jaylen doesn't really allow that to be the case, so he never harms the offense and what they're doing. I think that's huge.
It reminds me of Kyle Anderson when he said that, I trust him implicitly, you know, and it's different. The vet, and obviously those guys have different games, but I think what that means is it's like, I'm not worried about the things he can't do or doesn't do well, because he does other things well enough to not make that a problem, which when Kyle Anderson was working, that's what was true about Kyle Anderson, and that's been true about Jaylen Clark in this role as well. Let me grab another break here, and then we'll keep going. Today's show is brought to you by Factor Meals, and if you're ready to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. Really, my recommendation here is it's like if you're just feeling like you're spending too much time cooking, you know, it's becoming a burden. Maybe you work from home and you don't have that time to put together the meal that you want to put together. Maybe you're ordering food. Instead, Factor is a quick, easy option. 2 minutes. These meals get delivered to you refrigerated. 2 minutes to heat them up, and they are ready to go. Again, I find myself saving money having these over ordering out food that is not as healthy. You can eat smart too with Factor. You can get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FactorPodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Today's show is also brought to you by Skims. Skims, obviously, you probably know better from their women's lineup, but Skims has made a big push in the men's underwear department, and has been very involved with Team USA basketball and the NBA this season. My experience has been these are good shorts, or good boxers to wear under your shorts if you're playing basketball, or any sort of working out. They're comfortable and they fit effectively if you're a runner, playing basketball, or even just want something comfortable at home or at work, whatever it might be. I have the 5-inch stretch boxer briefs. Those are my personal favorite. Just try out a pair or two, see if it's something that fits you. You can shop Skims Men's at skims.com or at Skims stores. If you buy them online, let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, there's a spot right there that you can select the show in the survey and let them know that you heard about them from us. Skims, again, is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA basketball. Jace, last thing I kind of wanted to talk about, specific to that game last night. No Mike Conley playing, Dante DiVincenzo starts. I think this is kind of somewhat related to the playoff topic too, of, you know, if there's a series where Mike Conley doesn't have the same matchup, you can reasonably expect that his production in that series won't be what, you know, you would hope it will be, just kind of given the matchup. Well, then this type of Dante DiVincenzo becomes really important, and playing more minutes or playing point guard specifically, they need that gear some, and we gotta look at it last night with Conley resting. It was interesting. I mean, Dante didn't make his first basket until the third quarter. I don't think he took his first shot until the second quarter. It wasn't an offensive scoring game, but he had a ton of assists, and he was playing more traditional point guard. I'm just curious how you kind of felt about how that all looked last night and how important that is for the playoffs.
That is also a trend. I don't remember the other time that Mike didn't play recently. Dante didn't take a shot in the first quarter in that game either. And I think that is a huge part of the calculus of why Mike Conley starts and Dante DiVincenzo doesn't, is like they want Dante to shoot. Yeah. But his role in the starting lineup is not to shoot. So now those are minutes where he's just not, you know, and like it's not like the offense isn't running effectively, but those are 6-8 minutes, whatever, where he's like not taking a shot. Right. And that I just don't think they feel like that's how you maximize him. So I think and then that the evidence is bearing out in that. But I do think it's really important And last night obviously went well. I think it's important for them to see more minutes like that against decent teams and the few opportunities they have left in those games of there's just gonna be a series, and I even believe this, and everybody's like, well, what about against these teams? I don't think it'll be every series, but there'll be a series where it's like you might have to cap Mike out at 14 minutes. Because just like the team will be too physical or whatever. And I think it's important to see like a Dante, Nikhil, whatever, mostly Dante at the point guard with Rudy out there so that they can continue to work on like, okay, here's how we use Rudy in the offense when it's not just Mike.
Like reps.
Yeah, like more reps like that, I think will be valuable for when there probably comes a time if they make like a playoff run where they have to flip that switch and go, okay, it's got to be Dante. If not starting, then playing it the most. Because right now, all they're doing is toggling. Like Rudy, Mike. Okay, Rudy's out. Mike's out. Rudy's playing a little bit more than Mike, but not a ton. Just like more reps like that so that they can do it. Like last night helps, but I think they have to continue to work that, I think, just to make sure that they can do it. When I think if they make a deep playoff run, I think it'll be inevitable in one of these matchups.
Yeah, it is interesting how much more he feels like a point guard when he starts versus when he just comes in as the first sub. Because like he comes in as the first sub as Conley too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with that. But it is also with Nas, and generally when Nas is out there, it's just more of a movement-based offense, and you just don't really need a point guard. Like it's
I agree.
Yeah, it's. I don't know if it's because Rudy's out there or whatever, because sometimes Randall's kind of the point guard when he's out there, but that maybe is tougher to do when Rudy's out there. So
I think Dante just went in his head, Mike's not playing, I'm going to be a point guard.
Yeah.
Like last night.
Both times that he's done it, frankly.
Yeah. And when he comes off the bench, that's not what he's thinking. He's like, I'm coming in, I'm probably taking 3 threes here in the next 4 minutes, when the opportunity's there. I'm trying to make plays. And maybe for him, it's that to the reps point, maybe it's important to like get these reps and being able to toggle in his own minutes of like more traditional point guard play versus the other way. I do think
it was a Charlotte game.
Yeah, right. It's not that great. They just need they do need other guys to be able to do it. And Dante, started at point guard, but it isn't just Dante. And this was a big concern at the beginning of the year, was just how they were going to be able to play point guard at all in the Conley minutes. And Finch kind of said it was going to be by committee, and the committee wasn't very good at the beginning of the season. I asked him after the game about it, kind of improvement. This is interesting.
Has improved your minutes when you don't have a quote-unquote traditional point guard out there, no Mike Conley. How has that kind of just grown Dante, Nikhil, and whatever over the course of the season?
I think both Dante and Nikhil have done an outstanding job of figuring out like what being a point guard means to them in our offense. We've talked about the impact Julius has had a lot there too, and generally, sometimes I like to get to those lineups with Julius in there so they can all kind of share in it. I really like how it looks, because everyone's trying to do just the basics and then be the best version of themselves when the ball comes back to them. So they're not trying too hard to do too much, and that's not a slight on their point guard abilities. It's just that they're playing to their strengths, is another way to say it.
Do you have concern about that in a playoff series where like a team targets that, and it's like, okay, Nikhil's out here for these point guard minutes here, and so is just picking them up full court. Does a playoff opponent go, we're not going to let you get away with not having a real handler out here? Could that be exploited in a playoff series?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's I think when it was probably most noticeable early in the year, and now it's like we figured that out. It's like, I got Charlotte and Utah. Like I mean, as much as like all these things, they're just playing better basketball. I stand by that, but the things that are warts, your warts aren't going to be picked at or exposed by bad teams. Frankly, that's why they're bad.
Right.
Good teams will put you in more of a bind. Good teams have more guys who can be like, okay, whoever's on him, you pressure him as the ball comes up the court. Those types of things. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, like, during a playoff game, you're like, oh, geez, Nikhil, he's got pickpocketed there, by a good defender. And it's not, and like we saw earlier in the year, like, I don't think those things just go away. So I think that is probably one of the things with Minnesota where you go, okay, there might be a game where Conley just isn't like a defensive matchup. And even when he has the ball, gets a little bit bothered. And then they don't really have another place to turn.
Right. And that's why, and Finch mentioned Julius in there, and it
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
a big
goes
one.
to what we were talking about earlier about, Jaren Jackson Jr. just bringing it up as a release valve. Aaron Gordon was that last year in the Wolves Nuggets series when, Jaden or Nikhil are picking up Jamal full court. Like, Julius is better at that than Aaron Gordon or Jaren Jackson Jr. like by far. And
Jaren looks like he's bringing it up. Like if somebody did pressure, you probably take it. Yeah.
Or Julius
it's like,
is like,
the
let's
ball's
go.
up here. Yeah, and he's just kind of jogging. Yeah, where Julius is like, can look pretty guardy with his handle very much because that's a big part of his game is the handle. Frankly,
it would be the thing that's targeted, even if it's Julius too. They would try and pick him up full court as well, and it's gonna be ball pressure and. And Mike handles it always. Like there's a lot of things that Mike Conley doesn't do. I mean, how many times have we seen it this year where like somebody tries to pester him and he's bothered by it? He has 18 years of that. And for the things that Mike Conley can't give you, he's gonna, if you just need to get it up there and get into your offense, if it's the playoffs and the other team's on a 10-2 run and you need to get into your offense like an adult, Mike Conley will be able to take you there. And that's why he's an important part of this. But we're highlighting there are elements of Mike Conley's game that size, physicality, whatever, that we even saw last year in the playoffs when he was a younger, probably better version of himself, that were still problematic. So the point is they need another gear. And Rob Dillingham's out of the rotation. That's their actual backup point guard. It needs to be somebody else who can handle the point guard duties, and that they can kind of split that 4 ways between Dante, Nikhil, Ant, and Julius. I think that should be enough, even in a playoff series.
Yeah, and so often with these things like the bad moments or whatever, where it's like, oh, got pressure, turn the ball over. Like it comes back to where we talk about, are they going to be able to like manipulate matchups? Are they going to be able to just recognize somebody coming up the court going, that guy's getting full court pressed, I should go set like a dummy screen here, just to, and instead, oftentimes they just run away. They're like, you got it, dude. Like, bring it on up. I'll be up there if you need me.
They need to be able to do that without Finch calling a timeout.
Exactly, without him being like, no, don't run away. Like, what's the coach doing? It's like probably assuming that these guys can do what you do in high school, like that kind of stuff. Like those are the moments where it's like that guy looks bad, but it's because no one else did anything to help him out, and that's the stuff that especially gets tested in the playoffs, like those little things. They just have to get better at it. And that I think always for them, it's where do they rank in terms of like the IQ of stuff? And there are certainly times where they look like not a smart basketball team. But like you see, like I think it's progressed. I think it's gotten better. But the playoffs will be the ultimate test of that stuff.
Well, and it's why Finch's line to the theme of this is like, or the beginning of this episode, Finch's line is like, our biggest competition is ourselves. And I know that's a cliche. That's true about the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah.
It is, and it's a compliment actually. It's when they start not helping themselves, right? And then in turn hurting themselves. If the Wolves can kind of have that baseline of where the dip doesn't go too far down, and that's been the winning streak. That's been 2025 is just some like bumpers of not letting things get too chaotic, and I don't know, just the point guard play is one area of those where you're like, ooh, that could be something a team could poke at. But I do think Dante and Nikhil have just gotten better at it. Like their skill set is better.
I think Dante too, like that's what gives you some hope of, you see how Dante switches gears, what lineups he's in. Not everybody can do that of like, oh, here, now I do this. Like Dante is a really smart basketball player who's able to like read the room of like, what's required for me in this lineup? What should I do here? And he'll just say, I'm just playing basketball, but he clearly is adjusting what he's doing and realizing this guy's hot right now. This is who needs the ball, like point guard type things, not with the same necessarily point guard skill set, but just able to read the game, which is nice. But to what you're talking about, the Wolves are their biggest thing they have to contend with. I actually was looking at defensive stuff last night just for the exercise at the beginning of this podcast, and was like looking at who best defended within 8 feet. And in the NBA, it's a bunch of good teams. was like, yeah, they would struggle with them. And then I was like, and fourth is the Wolves, and they struggle with themselves. So like that makes sense too, you know. And it really is that. It's so often when they lose a game, and I'm sure every team does this, but you can pinpoint 2 or 3 things where it's like, well, you can't do that.
Right.
And it is often things where it doesn't feel like it was overly forced by the opponent. It's just, basically the problem for the Wolves is the teams who help guide them down the wrong path. And then they just wave and they're like, all right, see you later. We're heading this way. That's where they pointed us.
That's why I hate we're just going to take whatever the defense gives us.
Yeah, right.
Ant said that last night
Right.
after they gave it to it. It's like, you know, they're giving you that for a reason, you know,
Right,
or like
right.
they're leading you down that path. I like that it's the path of least resistance for them. And you know, and that's what a point guard
in the past, you know.
Yes.
Hey, why don't you take this guy one-on-one in a switch? And it's like,
Right.
that's what they're giving us, you know. I guess that's what I'll take.
That is what the Wolves need to actually fight, I think, in the playoffs more than anything, because particularly in a playoff game plan, the path that they're going to lead you down is, I mean, they probably have a pretty good idea of why they're leading you there, and the numbers behind that, and the why that's a practical move, and the Wolves need to be able to adjust off of that. And that's why point guard play is important. That's why coaching is important, to be able to guide you onto the actual right path, or the best path through that path there. Let's wrap this up. We got Wolves Pacers this evening. We'll wrap up with a little prize picks segment, as Jace and I do. It's just, you know, it was interesting in the locker room last night, just hearing some of the players are like, you know, this is a big one. The Wolves playing the Pacers just because haven't been playing a lot of very good teams. And I just think when it's an extra effort sort of game, give me Ant to get more rebounds and assists. His number was more or less than 10 rebounds plus assists in tonight's game. I'll say more than 10 there. And then I was just looking for a less than one. I was like, Julius Randle, 7 rebounds. I'm going to say less than that. Not that he's not a good rebounder. It's just Jaden's rebounding every game. Rudy's back. Julius hasn't had more than 7 rebounds in the last 5 games. So those were the 2 Wolves ones I picked. I had Miles Turner more than 6.5 rebounds up here too, but that's just a few I had from that game. Did you have anything?
I didn't pick anything from this game. I put Cat under points against Miami because someone was really impressed the last time Bam guarded Cat at what he was able to do. So I went under there.
Wait, I'm looking for Cat in the Wolves. That's not what it is. Yep. Okay. So that one, Cat. What was his point?
It was like
25 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
And then I was just scanning through them, and I just did Trey Murphy over points against Detroit. Because I don't feel like they have a really great defensive matchup for Trey Murphy.
Trey Murphy, okay, I like that. What is points?
It was in like the low 20s.
I'm on points, rebounds, plus assists here. Trey Murphy is at
21 and a half.
Why am I not? Oh yeah, there it is. Gosh. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you said more than or less than?
More.
Okay. I'll get rid of this Turner one. So again, if we do those 4, Ant more than 10 rebounds plus assists, Randall less than 7 rebounds, Cat more than 25.5 points, and Trey Murphy more than 21.5 points. That would be 10-1 if all 4 of those happen. You can do a flex play. So if all 4 hit, that's 5-1. But if only 3 hit, you get 1.5 to 1 on there. Sometimes flex plays, the more you put in there, that makes it fun. So in case you miss one, but prize picks, particularly during March Madness, I know they got a full slate up there. I don't know enough about college basketball right now to give you any picks there, but check that out.
I tried. I looked and I was like, I don't even know who these guys are. Yeah,
right. But I think people listening to this or we'll be watching during the tournament, and you'll be like, "Oh, I watched so and so in the second round and this," and give me more than 20 points in the Sweet 16. It's an extra fun thing to do, as we always say. You play for $5, but I do think during March Madness that'll be fun. They have a couple of free squares up on their college basketball page there as well. So I'm sure there'll be more promotions associated with the tournament coming there if you'd like to play at Prize Picks. All right, Jace, went a little long. I know we got another game tonight. Do you have anything else before we go?
No, not really. I mean, this is a Pacers game where it's like, okay, that's a good team. That's a test. But I think it is another one where it's like, it's at best a middle of the road defense. So I do expect Minnesota to play well, like the numbers say it's at best is like middle of the road, but it doesn't feel that way when I watch them. So I expect Minnesota to play well. I don't really think it hasn't been in the past like a team that's just going to give them very much trouble.
I am interested to see the Wolves shoot bad in a game.
Sure.
And what that kind of, particularly if it's against a good team, like, do they have that other gear to be able to beat you another way when it's, it's one of those first quarters we're looking at the end, we're like, all right, 2 for 14 from deep here. Is that going to be the way that you get it? But yeah, it is in a weak schedule, certainly a better opponent for the Wolves in this one. So I will be interested in, I think they play Pacers twice in the next 4 games.
Pacers, Pelicans, Pacers.
Schedule's so stupid.
It is. Yeah. And those teams, none of those teams are good at defense. None of those two teams. Yeah.
It really could. I think I was recorded with Kyle. I was like, I bet you like the winning streak ends with one of the Pacers games, but they're going to be the favorites in all 4 of those games.
Probably pretty hefty. I haven't looked tonight, but probably pretty hefty.
It really could keep rolling. And
then they play the Pistons after that. And that would be the game where I'd be like, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is a team that defends well, and obviously blew Minnesota on Detroit and all that stuff.
Yeah, it really is reasonable to keep picking them to win for a while now until that 5-game road trip at the beginning of April, which starts with Denver and includes road games against Milwaukee and Memphis and a few others there. But yeah, these ones are important, and I'm just hearing them in the locker room talk about how important tomorrow was. I'm interested to see how that does translate, where it's not just well, we need to start fast to put away the Jazz. We gotta play a good game. What does that look like?
It's just funny that in the middle of any other stretch, you'd be like, oh, we play the Pacers tonight. But just with the teams they've been playing, it's like, we got the Pacers tomorrow. Like, no more.
Lock in.
Yeah, right. This is a big one. In whose schedule is the Pacers a big game? But in this stretch, it is.
We knew it, man. We knew March was gonna be weird and a weak schedule, but they're taking care of business. So I can't even talk. Yeah,
playing well. They really are.
They really, really are. All right. Coming up next, what we're going to do tomorrow is Chris Hine has the game off tonight. So Britt's going to join me tomorrow. We'll talk about this big Pacers game. And then we'll get Chris on Thursday in Britt's place there. We'll keep moving throughout this week with episodes after all of the games against the teams whose names start with P. You guys can follow Jace on Twitter at Jace Frederick. You read him over at the Pioneer Press. Will I see you at the game tonight?
Yep.
All right. Until Tuesday with Britt, he's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing like nobody else around.